It's March 6th, Friday, 2026. When I was nearing my college graduation in computer science in 2009 at the University of Minnesota, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do afterwards. One of the things that I looked into was military service, and particularly I looked for an officer commission with one of the armed service branches. I specifically looked at the Army and the Air Force, again, late 2009, and found the recruitment departments for those two branches, or at least my experience with them, pretty different. And believe it or not, I've never really pictured myself as a Marine, so I didn't even bark up that tree. Anyway, for the Army, there was not a path to apply for the officer path directly. You took the basic ASVAB, or Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, and enlisted if you passed. Pretty basic stuff, and it's a standardized test that's far simpler than something like the SAT. Officer commissions were only out of nominations out of basic, but there was not a path to apply specifically for an officer commission. And that difference in structure was enough for me to kind of disconsider the Army as a viable path. For the Air Force, there was a specific path to apply for an officer commission, including needing a college degree and a standardized test called the AFOQT, or Air Force Officer Qualifying Test. I remember working with an Air Force recruiter to be a much more professional experience. The Army recruiter felt more like a used car salesman. I did end up taking the AFOQT down at Fort Snelling. It was a 5-subject test, timed, skewed heavily towards kind of spatial thinking, which, as it turns out, I'm very good at. Every area was scored on a percentile basis, and I had 398s and 299s across the 5 areas, so pretty good scores. I did not end up ultimately pursuing military service. The chief reason was because of a medical problem. Back in high school, I learned that I have a severe wasp allergy. Turns out all it takes is one trip to the ER with anaphylaxis, and you're not going to pass the medical exam if you were being honest. And honesty to me has always been pretty core to who I am. The main reason I picture that Army recruiter as a used car salesman or as just being pretty slimy is just that they told me to lie about that at the physical. They didn't say that's a disqualification. They were just basically like, yeah, you got to lie about that. No problem. We do it all the time. Ultimately, I think military service was not for me. I value autonomy too much, I think, to thrive in a military setting. And going into the private sector at a software corporation was honestly a great fit for my early career. I remember starting at Cerner back in 2010, and especially those first few years, as being a lot like the Wild West. Meaningful use money was flowing into the industry of the American healthcare. But the processes and procedures that my company had to implement our software at scale and at the pace we were selling things and shooting for simply did not exist. So as such, it was a great place for someone like me who's pretty good at putting that infrastructure together on the move and knowing that every day or every week or every month, you're probably going to be working on new things and new problems that are not, solved before. And that sort of environment was terrific. That plus the constant need for boots on the ground across the country. I earned a bunch of frequent flyer miles that I never really wanted, but getting out and working with people face to face was so important. And I do kind of have concerns about professionals in the industry today. I think there's going to be a lot less of that travel, especially after COVID, where we really learned to do things remotely. And there's certainly fewer and fewer opportunities for somebody who's new in the healthcare industry to have the sort of mentorship that we had with the way that we staffed projects back in the 2010s. So working with the military later in my career was a very neat experience. That was after about 10 years of having done the Road Warrior, the implementation of software. So by then, I was a subject matter expert in my field. And the people I enjoyed working with from the military the most, that were very often, if not in every case I worked with, level-headed professionals who consistently embodied the voices of reason in an environment where reason was not always in ample supply, were Air Force officers. And there are not enough of them. And they don't get paid nearly as much as they should for the level of stress and responsibility that that job entails. In a way, it's kind of like teaching, perpetually overworked and underpaid. And you do have to wonder, how can those people justify it? Especially in the face as Uncle Sam spends about $1 billion a day going to war with Iran without a definitive timeline or definite goals. I do admire those people because I think the answer is really they are mission driven, first and foremost. And I have seen that as an anchor for both the VA colleagues that I respect the most as well as the Department of Defense. And I guess at this point, I've never had a stronger amount of admiration for being able to stick to that mission. Because I think they're really working under the most dangerous and volatile administration we have ever seen.